Shalom, welcome to Eretz Israel. I'm Avraham Shira. Just a few thoughts before Shabbat comes in. Parshat Noach, this great flood came in the world, and most of the ancient writers of most of the nations have recorded this primordial flood. And this flood is really a result of the actions of the people at the time, as the Torah tells us, that he shchit kol basar darko, that all the peoples of the world corrupted their way. I don't think I want to get too much into the corruption. I think you could figure it out or find out if you want, but it wasn't pretty because God made us in a certain way according to a pattern and a plan. We are a pattern and a plan to bring divine energy into the physical realm. But if we break the pattern or the plan, then we actually obfuscate, we remove the reason that God created us in the first place. Because the whole plan is to bring divine energy into a physical realm. And so when a man keeps his covenant, as the Zohar tells us in Parshat Noach here, that when a person keeps the covenant, he is merits to the world to come. Now, it's a very interesting idea, this world to come that we're meriting. Well, guess what? The Sefer Bahir says that we came from the world to come. In other words, we're from the world to come. We come down to this physical world for as long as it takes. Sometimes it's many reincarnations. Sometimes the guy gets it right the first time. And then we go back. So we earn the right to be where we came from. What's that? Don't we have a right to go back to heaven because that's where we came from to begin with? No, but rather the place that we're going back to, the world to come, the world that was. Literally, Olam Haba means the world that came. We earn the right to go back to an even greater expression of that world, an expanded version. That a human being takes on truly divine qualities. And this is embedded in the story with the snake, when the snake says that you will be like God if you ate from the fruit. Well, we are already like God, but we didn't know it. See, but when you know you are, then you have a different relationship to the world. When you know you're created in God's image, you know you have power to change any moment, any time, any place. Then you know that you're not really from this world. We're not from here. We're visiting here. And the generation of the flood lost the map of the vision. The ancients had the idea of one God. They didn't have the full picture that the Torah gives us of how we come to this world, we keep the mitzvot, we bring God's light into the physical realm, we elevate this realm, and then this realm becomes a vessel to receive the world to come. That where heaven comes down to earth. I know when I first became religious a long time ago, I used to think, well, earth is going to go up to heaven. But no, that's not the way it works. It's exactly the opposite. That heaven comes down to earth because our mitzvot are bringing the light of heaven to earth. And so ultimately there's a collective critical mass of spirituality and holiness that it transforms the physical. Now, anybody who's had that experience on a personal level, well, knows what I'm talking about. You're no longer the same person when you have a direct contact with your divine soul, which is a spark of the creator of the universe. Okay, but the Zohar is telling us here that we merit to the world to come because of the covenant, because of an agreement of sexual propriety, of loyalty, of commitment. And if we keep that, we keep the channel for that Olam Haba light to come down here. And if a person breaks that commitment, that loyalty, that covenant, that agreement that you make under the wedding canopy, then you no longer can channel that light of the world to come. So you remove the very reason that we are here. So it makes sense that if I do keep the covenant, the Zohar says that's all you need. Anybody, it says, Kol man de natar brit, that anybody who keeps the covenant in this world, they merit to the world to come. Because that's the very reason why God created us, is to have this relationship, this covenant. And if you think about it, what if you were a great scientist and you created this amazing robot that was like your best friend? And he did everything you said, and all the programs were there. And it was a wonderful being, let's call the robot. And suddenly one day the robot decided to stop doing what you asked and broke all your agreements. How would you feel? All your wisdom went into creating this being, this robot, and now it's rebelling from you. How would that feel? So in a little way, we can understand from that why it's so important that we keep this covenant, because it's on that is based our presence here. And when we keep it, guess what? We get the reward of going back to where we came from, but we bring it, ultimately it's going to come down here. And there's a lot to talk about in this in terms of the messianic vision of the Jewish people, and the vision of the transformation of the world, and how it's supposed to look here. And there's so much said and written about it in all religions that we don't have the time to go through it here, because I see the shadows are starting to fall. They're ahead of me, actually. And it gives us the example. The Zohar says, Manle, who is like this tzaddik, this person who keeps the covenant? And by the way, a man or a woman can have this covenant. Da Yosef, right? Because he kept the Brit of the world. The covenant of the world doesn't just mean his own relationship, that the whole world depended on Yosef keeping that covenant. Because if he hadn't, he wouldn't have become viceroy. And if he hadn't become viceroy, then the Jewish people would not have been able to be prepared for the moment, of course, that Moshe Rabbeinu came along to take the people out in the great redemption story. So everything links and hinges on the thing before it. And here, Yosef, that's why he's associated with the Brit, why he's associated with this power of the power to receive the light from above and to give it over into this world. And that's what Yosef had. That's why he ran all of Pharaoh's business. All of Pharaoh's business was controlled by Yosef, and Yosef made a lot of money for Pharaoh. And this would have happened if he hadn't also kept the covenant. And I'll tell you one thing for sure, anybody who keeps the covenant, they're going to see a change in their bank account. Guaranteed. Take it to the bank. Go tell the owner of the bank. See what he has to say. But the deal here is that when one person's a tzaddik, he creates a condition that God is happy that he created the world, even for one person. Now, there could be 7.5 billion people on this planet. If one person keeps the covenant, God is happier. God has someone to relate to, someone to translate that light into the world. And that soul is called Tzaddik Yesod Olam. He becomes the foundation of the world, the reason why the light force comes in for the rest of the generation. So in the time of Noach was Ish Tzaddik, right? And because he was called a tzaddik, he was the Messiah of his generation. He saved the entire world. Now, the entire world at the time was only him and his 3 sons and their wives. It's not a very big salvation on human terms, but it was enough to begin the entire race. And of course, all the animals and the things that were in the ark. But the point is that Noach was chosen because he had this covenant with Hashem. Now, the Zohar has an interesting piece about Noach. It says, Noach cried after he opened up the ark, and he saw the dead bodies, and he wept, and he wailed, and he saw bodies floating in the water. And God said to him, Raya Shatya, you foolish shepherd, why didn't you cry before the flood? Your tears could have stopped the flood. But we know he didn't cry, and the Zohar says because he didn't pray enough for the generation before the tragedy. And folks, I think that's where we are now. Right now, today, in this world, in this society, in this global village, we need to pray before the flood. Now, the flood that came eventually purified the world, and that is the Mikveh Olam. The Mikveh of the world is when God just purifies everything and starts over. Now, we don't want that to happen again, but we see a lot of little floods happening all the time around the world, and that's part of God's promise, that he's not going to bring a flood on the entire world again. But he brings localized floods in various areas for his own reasons. But we do know this, that we have the power to push away the bad decrees. We have a power to keep the flood at bay. We have a power, and Rabbi Nachman says that the main flood, of course, is the flood of atheism, the flood of non-belief, the flood of, I'm not worried about God, leave me alone with this God idea. You and your God idea. You Jews, you never leave us alone with God. And we're trying, we don't have an agenda to bother people. Our agenda is the truth. Our agenda is that something inside us tells us that we have to be good Jews, and that's going to create enough of a reason for God to save the world. And right now, who knows what's going to happen? Who knows what's going to happen with the pandemic? Who knows what's going to happen with global warming? Who knows what's going to happen with the famines and the heat waves and the floods? And who knows what's going to happen with the high technology that man is creating so that there will be, Star Wars just might become a reality. Who knows? But we do know that the purification of the world takes place individually, and it can take place in an entire nation. And what we want to do is that the purification can come from the outside through a flood, or it can come from the inside when individuals decide, I want a covenant with God. I want a relationship with God. And that doesn't mean you have to be Jewish. It just means you have to be sincere. And going to the mikveh is a good thing for any person, anytime, anywhere. Men and women included. So we should, Erev Shabbat, our custom is to go to the mikveh. In the kabbalah, we try to go to the mikveh every day because the purification of the night energy, the dark forces of the night, needs to be removed from the soul each day. But that's another whole take on what this spiritual immersion is, because the physical aspect of the immersion, going in a pool of water, is really only the beginning of the understanding of what happens when we get that mikveh, because you clarify the mind, you think better, you feel better, you look better. I can look at a person and know if they've been to the mikveh, because you can see on their face the light, you can see the shine, you can see the clarity. The perception is what we exude and what we relate to the world, and it's not it's not hocus pocus, folks. It's just going out to the water. Go to your lake, go to your stream, go to your river, go to the ocean. If you don't have a mikveh nearby, you can go to any type of body of water that's natural, and you will see the difference. And it will clarify your mind to think the thoughts of who you really are. So I want to bless you. Discover who you are. Go to the mikveh. Let's fix the world before we have to deal with another flood. God bless you all. Have a great Shabbat. And we'll see you next week on all the platforms.